you are a real athlete. Like, you're working really hard to show up for yourself every day. And so it's totally okay, whatever their reason for running. And it's okay that like they invest a little in themselves with the prehab and the rehab and all that stuff.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 179 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here, my friends. I am excited you are joining us today. I have a wonderful guest that I can't wait for you to meet. And I'm just thankful for you being here and just all your support, all the things that you do to show that you care and show that you appreciate what I do. So thank you to each and every one of you who has taken some time out of your day to make my day better, because it really does make a massive difference. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you are a Run to the Finish fan, welcome. I hope you are enjoying this and you continue to enjoy this, and subscribe to the podcast at the end, or you can subscribe now if you want to trust me. So before we get on to today's episode, let's talk about last week. Last week we had Margot Mountjoy on the show, and now we've had her on, you are going to start seeing her name everywhere. You know how like when you decide you want something like a car or a certain brand of something, you just see it everywhere you go. Like for me right now, I see Teslas everywhere because I really, really want a Tesla, or any electric car if anyone wants to donate one to me. But Tesla in particular, I see them everywhere I go. I'm so aware of them. And you mark my words, one day I will have one way or another. We will see where that goes. But anyway, last week we had Margot Mountjoy on the show, who is a researcher. She's a scientist. She has been a part of many, many massive research articles, collaborations. She was kind of the person that got the Reds conversation going in the first place, and she's just a wonderful woman who is really doing more than her part to help improve the running world. So we had her on the show. She was just, great to chat to, great to learn from, and more of a sciencey kind of episode, which is more kind of back to what I used to be doing a lot of, and I know I've been kind of neglecting those lately. So if you missed that one, be sure to go back and listen to it. Now today we have Amanda Brooks on the show. Amanda is known for her running website, Run to the Finish. It's done very, very well. She has a massive readership of her blog. She's one of the few, as you will hear, few websites that has managed to cling on to that kind of blog title, as we don't see that many of those anymore. So yeah, I'm excited to bring Amanda on. She does have a book coming out with the same title as the name of her website, Run to the Finish. But Amanda and I are going to talk about, we don't really actually talk about her book that much, so don't worry, it's not another book episode, but we talk about a lot of things that we haven't ever covered on the show today, and I think it's really great insight to think about these things and to learn from the things that she has done over these years. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think, and you can find links to everything we talk about today in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 179. Now we're just going to take a moment to thank our sponsors, and we'll be right to the episode.
Today's sponsor is Vital Farms, who you may know for their pasture-raised eggs. Those are the ones in the black box. They have like chalk-looking writing on them. They are absolutely delicious. They're my favourite kind of eggs. Actually, the only eggs I will buy from the grocery store now. They are just so good. They have bright yellow yolks, which is exactly what you should be having. And I'm really excited that Vital Farms, in addition to eggs, hasn't been making pasture-raised butter for years, which I actually didn't know until I started working with them. And they also believe that great ghee, which is a kind of cooking ingredient, I'm going to explain in just a second before you think, what is ghee? Great ghee starts with better butter, and all that starts with cows. So they have pasture-raised cows that are raised to graze on actual pastures, you know, how cows should be. And Vital Farms make this ghee, which is a clean and versatile butter oil for every culinary need. It's made by cooking down butter to remove the water and milk solids, which is called clarifying, which means it's also lactose and casein free. Vital Farms ghee has a high smoke point, so it doesn't burn or chemically alter at high heats, which means it's great for frying or sauteing. I know many of you love your stir fries, I know I do, and this is ideal for that, and many other things. I love to roast my sweet potatoes in this ghee. It's equally delicious on toast. You can put it in your coffee, you can drizzle it on popcorn, however you like. Vital Farms pasture raising ensures that its four-legged friends are free to roam and forage around the open pastures on the American family farms they call home. This makes for happy cows, better butter, and now a greater ghee. You shouldn't have to sacrifice quality for convenience in the kitchen, and that's why Vital Farms is the first ever ghee in a squeeze bottle. The complex goodness of ghee is even more convenient and ready to dispense. No spoon required, which actually, if you have used kind of the jar ones with the spoon, it is actually a little bit more awkward than you think it does. Loads of it gets stuck under the rim, and yeah, this is definitely a much easier thing to do. Look for Vital Farms ghee in a squeeze bottle exclusively at Whole Foods in original and Himalayan pink salt, and you can visit vitalfarms.com/G. That's vitalfarms.com/GHEE. GHEE. I know that spelling is a bit weird. To win a year's supply of Vital Farms ghee for free. That's vitalfarms.com/GHEE. Go do it and let me know what you think.
Amanda, I am so excited to bring you on the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. We've been, I would say, friends. It's so weird with that term with kind of this online world, but I would say we've been friends for, I don't know, at least 5 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And that mostly started with kind of the old-fashioned like blogging community, probably around 5-6 years ago, and has kind of, we've both developed over that time. The industry has changed a lot, but your blog is one of, I think, a few. Your website is one of a few that I think has kind of managed to hold on to the kind of concept of giving people regular content on a website, not on a social media platform, not on, just little snippets of things, but you've held on to that kind of traditional format and done well with it. There aren't many who have kind of continued that and been able to do all the social media stuff. And, that kind of persistence has paid off for you. We're going to talk a little bit later about you having a book coming out with the same title as your website, Run to the Finish. We'll talk about that later. But firstly, you kind of have always said that you are focusing on kind of the middle of the pack. You want to give research, give advice, kind of do the legwork for the middle of the pack runners. Why did you feel the middle of the pack runners specifically needed kind of their own source of advice? Like, what was it about this group that you admit and you say that you belong to that needed something special of their own?
That's a great question. So I think for me, it was that I kept noticing the number of people who would sort of make statements about feeling like they weren't a real runner. And I could tell it kept coming back to pace, or they maybe didn't run a marathon, but they've run like 10 half marathons and still are like, oh, no, I'm not a real runner. And I was like, okay, we've got to really figure out how to break this mindset that there's a certain number on your watch or, a certain race distance that suddenly makes you qualify. And I know it's easy to get caught in because running always has a next goal. Like you can always get faster or go farther. That's part of what brings us back every day. And I kept I noticed it for myself even where I would have times and then, I would go to a race and realize I keep saying that I'm slow, but gosh darn, I'm either in the middle or I'm in the top 10% of finishers. But then I look at Instagram and see everyone's watch photos and suddenly I'm like, oh no, I am not a good runner. And I was like, this is crazy. I love it. I love to run. If I never ran another race, I wouldn't care. I am so happy to be out there. And I think the number of people who have started to fall into that category continues to increase, where they're like, man, I just enjoy it. And I want to do this for as many years as I can. So I was like, okay, I want people to know that like, it doesn't matter about your pace. And even if you aren't at the top, you can still be investing in yourself in terms of like the dynamic warm up or like why foam rolling matters for you. And I think even physical therapy, we sort of have an idea that like, oh, that's for like a real athlete. And I'm like, no, you are a real athlete. Mm-hmm. Like you're working really hard to show up for yourself every day. And so I just wanted those people to feel recognized and to know that like, it's totally okay, whatever their reason for running. And it's okay that like they invest a little in themselves with the prehab and the rehab and all that stuff.
So related to that, the prehab and the rehab stuff, I think that is, a really great point, especially because from what I see, a lot of the middle of the pack runners are the runners who kind of maybe need that extra, the foam rolling. They can't get away with, many of you listening can't get away with not doing some kind of warm up. You do tend to have little injuries that turn into big things and have always kind of, like you said, I just want to run, but my body is not cooperating. But by having a resource, a place that people can go to actually like find the things that will keep them healthy, that will keep them being able to do what they do. That's what I really think is the magic of what you do here. And you mentioned about pace and not feeling like a real runner. And, I've talked about this endless times on this podcast about, how everyone is a real runner. And I've now got to the point where when I'm having a conversation with someone, even if I've just met them, and they say, well, I'm not really a runner. And I'm like, yes, you are. And I like start the lecture going. But, you mentioned about pacing there and how that is kind of seen as the kind of marker of whether you're a real runner or whether you're good enough. And I've mentioned before about how people always kind of almost introduce themselves for the first time as someone saying, I'm a runner, but I'm not fast. Like that's literally the qualifier people use. And I love that you are kind of on this journey with me to get people away from the clock, to get people away from paces. And I know the old me, probably when we first started interacting, didn't really help the situation when, elite runners do say, like for me right now being pregnant, and I say to friends, I'm running like 8:30 to 9-minute pace. And, to most people, they're like, well, that's still fast. So I know that in the past, I know I keep that mostly to myself, but I know in the past I didn't help with things. But let's talk about ignoring the clock. That's something that you have talked about a lot. I talk about what I call no watch me, of not looking at your pace during runs, which is the same thing that you are very like passionate about. Like, the clock doesn't define you or say anything about you. So for those thinking, maybe coming into the sport who have been ingrained by social media or whatever it may be, that it is about the clock. Isn't it about the finish? Aren't I supposed to be constantly, trying to beat the clock?
It's funny because I think every finish line is really just a new start, right? Mm-hmm. So every time we cross a finish line, we've now probably set a new goal for ourselves. And so I'm sort of like, if you're always just chasing that time, then you're either never satisfied or, maybe you just had one of those runs that we all have that just go horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. And so you have a race day where the clock says something horrible, but you spent 6 months of dedicated time showing up, having amazing workouts. And it bums me out that people are going to let that one day then define how well they actually did. And so that's where I think the middle of the pack misses out a little, because they don't invest in themselves in terms of getting a coach or taking a program about the mental training. And so they don't have those resources and that support behind them to say like, listen, it was a bad day and that's okay. Like, we're going to take a couple weeks and we're going to find you another race. But like, everything you've done is so incredible. Like, you got up every morning at 4 a.m. or you squeezed it in around the kids. And so I think just keep coming back to like the bigger reasons why we're out there. It's amazing when we have a PR. Don't get like, I'm not saying that's not an amazing feeling, but it just isn't the only measure of why we're doing this. Most of us didn't start running, minus some of you super fast elite people. Mm-hmm. Most of us didn't start running because we were trying to hit a PR or be on a podium. Like we started running because it was stress relief, or maybe it was weight loss, or it was just mental time to not be on our phone. And that gets lost so quickly because we start like judging that pace thing. And I think if we can keep going back to that deeper, like, why am I here? It makes such a difference. And there was actually a great new study that just came out, and it's not terribly surprising, but looking at people and their enjoyment level of running really determined how consistent they were and how long they stuck with it. And if every run is frustrating because you aren't hitting a pace, you're not enjoying it. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to keep showing up for your workouts and to keep doing it. And so I feel like we kind of lose out on something that we were finding joy in because we're so focused on that watch.
So true, so true. And then what about the other side of things for those people who say, yeah, okay, well, I am all about just doing it for joy. I don't have time goals. You know, I'm in this phase of life where I am just doing it because I love to do it, because I feel good, you know, when I do it. Why do I have to bother with all this extra stuff? Like, can't I just like go out the door and do my run and then be done with it for the day? Because that's the part I enjoy. So what would you say to those people?
So I would say to those people, if you want to keep doing it and keep enjoying it, then we've got to stay injury free. And no matter how long I have been coaching, how long I have been running, like I rarely come across a runner who won't at some point end up injured when they're in that mindset of all I want to do is run. I mean, I've done it myself early on, like most of us.
That's me right
now. And so just being willing to like, I try in the book to give you a lot of ideas, but I even say this on the website a lot, like habits. I am habits. It's like my favorite word. So if you can get to the point where you're doing that dynamic warm up before your run, you can incorporate so many of like the core and the hip things in that one time period so that you don't have to feel like you're setting aside all this additional time throughout the week. And so just sort of in your head, that kind of switch of like, okay, I'm willing to invest 10 minutes in myself before I start running so that I can keep running, so that today's run might actually feel better. Mm-hmm. And that's even with strength training. Like I do it. It may not be my favorite thing, but I very much have the mindset that like this strength time is making me a better runner, and that helps. So I think a lot of it is like the mindset we have around it. And so if running is your passion, like mine, then like everything you do, just keep telling yourself like, this means I get to run long this weekend. Yeah. This means that 3 months from now, I'll still be running. I won't be injured. Like if you can help yourself that way.
Great advice. Thank you. All right. So let's talk about your running journey. You mentioned many people come into the sports for different reasons. And I want to talk in a little bit just about kind of a major setback you had recently that has kind of, will really resonate with people and really kind of, I don't want to say gave you a reality check, because you never really seemed like you were kind of trying to get away with things anyway, but it was a really tough time to get through. But tell us about you coming into the sport. There's a quite a good story there that I think the listeners would enjoy hearing.
Yeah. So I grew up playing sports, but running was honestly, it was punishment, like you were late to practice. I even clearly remember being on the softball team and like running the bases and having people yell at me like, come on, you can go faster. You have such long legs. You look so awkward. Like they literally told me how bad I was at running. I would fake knee pain. I would do whatever I could to get out of it. And then towards the end of college, some friends were going to do a road trip to run the Rock and Roll Nashville half marathon. And honestly, I just wanted to go. It didn't cross my mind
on
that
the trip.
Yeah, it didn't cross my mind that I could just go. Like, I could only go if I was going to run this race. So I, just started doing kind of run walk and just kept building up. I have no idea where I got my information because this was 2002. I was a broke college kid, so I know I didn't buy a book. I think I just started running. So I probably did everything wrong, but was lucky enough to be young. So my body handled it. And I ran that first race, and it was hard, of course, but I remember the satisfaction of crossing the finish line and then just kind of wanting to see what I could do. I didn't start signing up for a bunch of races. I just kept running for me. And, I would run a race every year and just kept sort of going till eventually I had a friend a male friend, he's like 6'5", much larger than me, and said, I really want to do a marathon. It's on my bucket list, and you're the only person crazy enough to do it with me. And I feel like that was actually a big turning point because all of a sudden I started to learn about running a lot more, because once you're getting into those miles, you have to learn some stuff. And that really was a turning point. Finishing that kind of solidified, I love this. It also solidified for me that I love it whether there's a race or there's not a race.
Yes, so good. And so where did it go from there to where this kind of became your path? Running became, essentially in a way you are a professional runner, because that's, your job. Doing running stuff is your job. So, how did it go from there to where you are now?
Yeah. So that marathon was 2005. And then 2007, I worked at a tech company, and one of the guys there was always up on the latest stuff, and he kept talking about blogs. In fact, in 2005, I technically started the blog, but I only wrote on it twice, and then I didn't come back till 2007. And all of a sudden in 2007, it clicked with me. And I think it was because I had gotten so much more into running and so much more excited about it that I wanted people to talk to. And I didn't really have those people around me. So I was writing every single day. I think sometimes 2 times a day. And granted, like, things were little paragraphs back then, but I kept going. And there hasn't been a time since 2007 where I've posted less than 3 times a week, I don't think, which impressive. Is insane. Around 2012, though, it hit a tipping point where I was spending so much time on it. And I was really, at that point, starting to grow into, I think, my voice. My journalism background was really kicking in, and I wanted to write these articles, and social media started to become a thing. And so I sat down and kind of looked at it and said, I either have to try this and go all in, or I have to stop. Like, I can't work 80 hours at my corporate job and another 20.
What were you doing at that time?
So I was an e-commerce consultant, which helped tremendously because I had obviously a lot of online knowledge. But it was an intense job, and I was working with very large companies. So I was working 80 hours a week and then like 20 hours on the website. And my husband and I sat down, and he was like, give it a year, see what happens. Like, you can't keep doing what you're doing. And so lucky for me, I feel like in that year, I did give myself the opportunity to see what could happen. And I really finally honed in on my voice and who I wanted to talk to and how I wanted to write. So I didn't really want to talk about, here's the run I went for anymore. Mm-hmm. I wanted to like research things. And it's amazing to even watch in that span of time how much my writing has improved, which I think is in general with any business. But yeah, it kind of started there, and every year just kept growing, and I kept learning things. And so I feel very fortunate. It really turned into a full-time business.
And how has the vision changed? Like, what you, at that moment, what you kind of set out to do, are you still doing that? Or how was it transitioned since then? You know, as obviously technology has changed, times have changed, but how different is it?
A lot of it is the same. And so there are places where I probably could have like 10x'd the business previously that I just didn't, because I love to write and I like to talk about running. And it was like, this is really where I want to be. And I'm really happy with what it's doing. Certain things have definitely changed. I added coaching. So I went and got certified in personal training and learned a lot and wanted to make sure I could really be useful. And so that business has grown. And now we have an online group coaching so that we can help more people at a lower price. And those are things I'm super excited about. Social media is obviously a huge thing. I mean, in 2012, Instagram was like just starting. There was no Pinterest really, like that wasn't huge. And Facebook business page. So like now the amount of time that's needed to get eyeballs is a lot more. Mm-hmm. And kind of like you said, it's been fascinating. Every year I try to do a post of like top running websites, top blogs, and the number keeps dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. There are just less people who are like trying to make their running website into something. And so it has been kind of crazy to see where there were thousands of us, like it's narrowed down, but I think it's either people have decided they just want to enjoy it and write about their life, or like me, I just happen to really love the research. So it makes it easy for me to write those kinds of articles where I think that's just not interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I think that, but I think people reading, people listening, the audience, that those who are listening right now, from what I get, maybe it's just those of you listening who I kind of connect with, we actually all still love that kind of long form. Here's, kind of everything you need to know in one place about this topic. Like we still kind of soak that up. And yes, sometimes we're all guilty of finding an article and thinking, oh, I'm going to read this, and getting halfway through and be like, oh, okay. And I'm done. And you just kind of scroll, like half skimming, half kind of wanting to get to the bottom. But I do think there's something magic about like everything is so quick, and like changing so fast that there's something that I don't know, I definitely cherish about, someone taking time to make something into kind of a longer form version. And that's what you've been able to kind of like hold on to as the numbers have been dwindling. Like you said at the beginning, you were just kind of doing a paragraph. And I think that's what a lot of blogging was for many years, was just kind of, I'm going to get this out for the sake of getting this out. Like I have nothing to say, and that's why there was a lot of those kind of what I ate Wednesday thing, which really wasn't anything to do with it. Like I just don't really understand, how things like that were, and no offense to the people who created that, they obviously did well with that. I think people want to get solid information and learn and get to know people in a way that maybe a few years ago they weren't able to do. So you hanging in there has kind of been a really cool thing to see. And let's talk about like friends and family. When you made that decision to step away from a job, which I'm assuming you're probably doing pretty well at, like money wise, to kind of essentially take a big risk like this with your website, or even just calling it a blog, like blog in general, that word doesn't kind of bring confidence to the average person. If you just said, I have a blog, or actually that's kind of honestly what a lot of my friends and family still describe what I do, which makes me irate. But like, how did friends and family react to that time?
So it was really funny. I was doing very well in my job, and I'm super close to the people who owned that business. So I was like employee 10, and we were up to like 120 employees. And so I remember going in to tell them I needed to quit, and I was crying. Like I was sobbing, like, I'm so sorry. I don't want to leave you. And being that they are fantastic human beings, they were like, let's just call it a sabbatical and you can come back anytime. Year later, they were kind of like, wait, you're actually not coming back? So, I mean, he quite certainly did not think this blog thing was going to turn into a business, and he was just willing to give me time off. But I appreciated it. That was great. I was terrified to tell my parents. I mean, I was 30, but I was like, oh my gosh, if I tell them that they worked so hard for me to go to college and get a great job. And now I'm going to quit this amazing job to blog. I was like, they're going to lose their minds. Mm-hmm. But they didn't. They were like, listen, you are one of the most level-headed people we know. We are quite certain that if you're doing this, you've probably been thinking about it and you have a plan. And I was like, oh yes, I have written down every penny. Like, is this going to affect us? We're super savers. So it was like, we knew we could manage it even if I totally flopped. So luckily, like, they were also supportive, and friends, I think, were probably inwardly like, what is she doing? But sort of like, okay, that's cool. Like, what does that mean? And of course, I didn't really have an answer for what it meant either at that point.
What did you say you did if you met someone for the first time?
I don't know if I said blog either, because I did have that connotation that like blog wasn't serious. Mm-hmm. So I think I just said I have a website about running, and that's still what I say a lot of the times to keep it simple. Yeah. And in fact, I have talked to some of them in more recent years who were like, oh yeah, I remember when you said you were going to do that. And I was kind of nervous for you. I'm like, I just appreciate that. Honestly, at the time, none of them said it. Like, none of them said, you're absolutely crazy. This is insane. Don't do it. They all just were like, all right, good for you. Like,
did you have any like aunts and uncles or like older relatives who were kind of like, are you going to get a real job? Or when are you going to, even now, maybe when are you going to get a real job?
I don't have any of that. And I think I don't really know why. I don't have any of that. I'm sure that my husband's family very much did not understand. They still have no idea what I do. It's all very foreign to them, but luckily they've never actually said it to me. I'm sure there was lots of questions in their mind, but I've been fortunate that those people have had those conversations without me.
They've kept it to themselves. That's good. So I remember in 2012, I remember this so clearly. My dad said to me, he's like, it's good that you do this blog and stuff, but it's never going to make you any money. And every year, even to this day, every year when I kind of add up my kind of numbers for the year, I'm like, what was that you said about me not ever making any money? And every year he's like, yes, I know I was wrong. Like, my dad hates being wrong. So every year I like to remind him of that. He didn't say it in a kind of like, what are you doing way? And at the time I was doing other things as well. So I had that, at least that to back on. But I remember that so clearly, him saying to me like, this blog thing isn't going to make any money. And I was like, watch me. And
well, it's so funny because growing up, I wanted to be a writer so badly. I mean, I would write stories and take them into teachers and ask them to critique them. Like, I wanted to be a writer. And so that's why I went to journalism school. But then I just kept hearing over and over, like, writers don't make money. Writers don't make money. And, I'm a Midwestern girl who, I was like, I need to make my parents proud, need to go get a good job, climb the corporate ladder. And so I think it has probably been twice as rewarding now to be able to kind of see like, man, this thing that I always wanted to do is how I'm making my living. Yep. Now, I am super grateful for all the time that I spent in the corporate world, because I think it's probably part of what's helped me be successful. But it is really rewarding to look back and see that now.
Thank you to Body Health for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast and for supporting me for all these years. You have heard me talking about Body Health Perfect Amino for probably 5 years now, and there is a reason for that. I truly believe in this company and Perfect Amino and what it does. And I have to say, recently when I was at the California International Marathon, there was a ton of you that came up to me and said how you had heard me talking about it all these years, probably pestering you, but you've decided to give it a go, and you were kind of shocked by the difference it made and how much better you feel. There were so many people that said that to me in person, and it was just so nice to hear, in addition to those of you who reach out to me. So if you are listening to this and you've been hearing me talking about it and you're wondering,
I don't get it. Like, how does it work? Like, what does it do that's so special? Well, I just want to kind of explain again, as it's been a little while since I've said this. So we all know that we need amino acids. They help with recovery. They kind of build our body up. You know, we're breaking them down with training, and amino acids are what you need to build it back up. But what we don't often talk about or hear about is that only up to 48% of the food that we take in these protein sources is actually able to be utilized, I should say. The rest of it is converted to waste. So that's things like eggs are 48% of them are utilized, meat, poultry, and fish, 32% of it our body can utilize and turn into these amino acids. However, body health, 99% of it is utilized by the body. Only 1% has to be kind of removed and taken out as waste, which means that your body can get what it needs. It can help you to recover. I've really seen the difference in myself. As I've said so many times, as an elite runner, I trained using this. I really noticed the difference when I missed it for a few days. And now I take it just to kind of help my body recover with all the other things I'm throwing at it. So it really helps with that too. It contains the 8 essential amino acids the body needs to support and maintain its muscular, skeletal, enzymatic, that's such a hard word to say, and hormonal systems. So you've heard me talking about it. So go give it a try. Go to tinamuir.com/aminos. That's AMINOS. tinamuir.com/aminos, and go into 2020 right. Come on, let's set you up so that you can succeed and you can recover, because if you are healthy and staying healthy, then you are going to have the races that you want. You can give yourself the best chance to succeed. So go get some. tinamuir.com/aminos.
So I think it has probably been twice as rewarding now to be able to kind of see like, man, this thing that I always wanted to do is how I'm making my living.
Yep.
Now, I am super grateful for all the time that I spent in the corporate world, because I think it's probably part of what's helped me be successful. But it is really rewarding to look back and see that now.
Yeah. So let's talk, for someone who's interested or curious, like, what are some of the perks of what you do? Tell us about some of the good things that you do feel really fortunate, opportunities that you may get, or whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing to me is I've always also wanted to travel. So I love to see the world. Some of the opportunities that I've gotten are things that I simply never would have done on my own, like running the Jerusalem half marathon. Like it's not a place I would have ever said, honey, let's take a vacation to do this. But it was incredible. And seeing that country was amazing. Or I went with Saucony to Ireland, and we ran a relay through the countryside and finished, in Kinvara, which was the shoe that I had been wearing for like 7 years. And so a lot of those things, I think, for me have been the big things. And I kind of point to that too when I look at all of this and say, like, I'm trying to create a lifestyle that makes me happy as much as like just grabbing the next dollar. Like, I want to be at peace. I want to know that the work I'm doing is good. And so those opportunities have been beautiful and something I'm so grateful for.
Okay. And then what about the other side? What are some things that people listening may not see, or frustrations that you may have that aren't really, something that might come to mind for someone who isn't, doing something like this?
So one of the weird things is when your life is your work. So every single one of those trips that I'm on, I need to be writing about it and documenting it. And like, I'm, the hotel paid for me to be there. So it's not just come in and like crash on the bed. It's like, hold on, don't put your luggage down. Like, I need this photo or I need this video. So like the whole time my brain is still working. And even when I'm out on runs, a lot of times that's when I'm writing articles in my head, which is great, like the creativity, but also like, okay, I just want to go for this run and like, let it go. So I think some of those things, and then kind of going back to like families and friends not really knowing what we do. So when those hard moments hit, my husband will always listen, but he doesn't get it. Yes. And he says that he's sort of like, I don't know what to say because I don't understand this world. Like, and so it can feel very isolating. You know, you work from home, your job is online. And so you have to work really hard to like find some other folks who get it. Honestly, like that for me, I don't mind being by myself or working at home, but man, finding those people who I feel comfortable asking the questions like, oh, this brand wants this, and I feel like it's not fair. Like, I can't ask that to most people. Or like, oh, I'm trying to figure out this book thing and someone's coming at me like, am I wrong? Is this crazy? Those things are tough. And knowing who's going to really kind of give you an honest answer or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Amanda and I, before we started this conversation, we spent 15 minutes of me kind of talking, venting to Amanda about something I was struggling with. And I think that is, you know, it is a tricky part and something that people might not see. Yeah, they might see the glamour of going to these locations and getting to do all these really cool things, and they're amazing opportunities. But as you said, it's very isolating. And it is hard to get yourself out of the mindset of thinking about photos. And that's, you know, I've talked a lot in recent months about struggling with social media. And for me, that's part of it, that I really was finding it hard to be in the moment of anything. Yeah. When I was thinking constantly about, okay, how can I get a photo of this? When, you know, and it's just, and that is, you know, we'd all love to be someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, or maybe wouldn't, who has a camera crew following him around 24/7 so he can just do what he's doing and then not even worry about getting it because his team are on it. But that is one of the downsides that I think people don't mention. And do you struggle with that, with like being present in the moment, like you said about your run just there? Like, is any part of you worried that that's robbing you of your run because you're not even like processing your problems, you're just thinking about posting?
Yeah. So there were a couple things I did because I started to feel like that. I felt like every run, was getting longer because I was trying to get a photo and find the right spot. And so I now never post a photo from that day. I usually will like take a batch of photos. So there, you know, are certain runs that I'll go on where I'm like, oh, this is just nice. And I'm just out for an easy day, and I'll get a bunch of photos that day and then spread out the usage. And so then I have a bunch of runs I can go on and never think twice about taking a photo. And that was huge for me, like realizing that people do not care that I am sharing multiple photos from the same run. Like in your head, initially, it's like, oh no, I can't share that because they'll have seen it before. I'm like, I don't even remember what I posted last year. I could probably just repost everything I posted last year. Like no one's going to remember. So I think that technique helped. And then since my husband is not on social media, period, like he has an Instagram account so that he can look at my photos and cat photos and bike photos. Like he doesn't care like about stories and whatever. So that helps me actually, like when we're doing things, because I can tell he's never ever once like made me feel bad, because he's like, you're doing your job. I understand you need to get these things. But because he's not also interested and he's not looking at everything as a photo, it does help me just put it away and just kind of be there. So for me, I think it's probably, there are times where I watch my friends with, as we call them, Instagram husbands, and I'm like, he gets the best photos of you. I'm like, I'm lucky when David gets my head in the photo. But it's probably good for me, actually, that he is not interested in all of it.
Yep. Well, I think most of my listeners know that Steve is very much the same way there. And what about like with, you know, you've mentioned you post on your website 3 times a week, every week since 2007. And you also, we did say share on social media often. Do you ever feel unmotivated to write, or times when you want to step away and think like, I just, you know, I'm fed up of doing this. I'm not in love with running right now.
Yeah. I have moments where I don't feel like being on social media. I haven't really had burnout on the website, which I think is sort of crazy, but I'm always excited about it. Like, I think it's a little like running. There's so many topics. Like I have just a running list of like ideas of things that I could write about, or even I go back and look at the stuff that I wrote 3 or 4 years ago and realize like, gosh, there's actually so much more I could say about this. And so updating it, or I'm learning, about email lists. So I think luckily, I just kind of have that internal drive that I'm excited to see what else I can figure out. So on the website, I've actually felt pretty good. Social media, though, because it can just feel like so much and so much of your time. There have certainly been periods where I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to comment. I don't want to scroll. I don't want to post. I don't want to talk to anybody. And so those are the days where sometimes I do simply take time off, and other times where I just say, well, this is the business that you've chosen to be in. And there are parts of every business that you don't love.
That's true.
And luckily, like, because I feel like I've grown in such a organic way, I really enjoy the community that I have connected with on Instagram. And that for me has made a big difference. Those people and their words, and knowing that I'm providing something, hopefully that either just makes them laugh when I just say something silly, or that's actually really useful to their day. That helps a lot.
And hello to many of those people, because probably a lot of them are listening right now. So that's good that they get a little shout out. All right, so let's go back to running specifically for a little while. Now, your running journey hasn't been smooth, at least in the last 5 years. You did have knee surgery. Was it about 1.5 years ago?
It's actually been over 2 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So tell the listeners about what happened there. Like, knee surgery, I mean, that's no joke. That's something like every runner kind of fears. And you've joked a lot about how that was the fact that when you were younger, that's what you used to fake. And it kind of came back to bite you. But tell us about what happened and how you got to the point where knee surgery was the option.
Yeah, it was definitely ironic, because all of a sudden I was now trying to find ways to run through knee pain rather than using it as a reason not to run. So in January, we went to an indoor trampoline park with some friends and spent an hour there going crazy. And the next day, my knee looked like a basketball. And from there, I couldn't straighten my leg. And so we did, all the MRIs, all the tests, and nothing was really showing up. And so no one really knew what to do. But it kept getting progressively worse, to the point where it was painful to walk, because you're walking with your leg bent 24/7. And in fact, it was actually slightly more comfortable to run, because I could almost just kind of do an easy jog and keep that leg bent. So it took about 8 months before we actually decided to do surgery. And it took 3 different doctors. So first doctor said, I think you need a full knee replacement. And that was obviously terrifying at my age, because those only last so many years. But I was willing to do it if it was going to get me back to running. Luckily, I decided I wanted second opinions, and I found sports-focused doctors, which is one of the things I try to tell a lot of runners. If you can find a sport-specific, they're so much better about not just saying things like, oh, just rest. And so finally, we worked through some different things, and he was like, I think we just need to do exploratory surgery and see what we can find, because now you can hardly walk. You're in a ton of pain. And I had actually gone into, that was my, I think, 2nd or 3rd meeting with that doctor. That's exactly what I was going to tell him that day, was I don't care, cut it open. And so that's what we did. And they ended up cleaning up a little bit of fat pad that had slid down. They cleaned up the meniscus. They cleaned up some torn cartilage. And then the biggie was that they realigned my kneecap. And so if it had just been the small pieces, I think recovery would have gone fairly fast. The realigning the kneecap is a big one, but still I was actually running again about 10 weeks later, which my physical therapist was like, that's on par with like elite, like NBA athletes come back that fast. And he's like, which is all because in those 8 months leading up to that, I was going crazy doing all the physical therapy, all the hip work, all that strength work. And so it allowed me to have the muscle control to come back. But that being said, like 8 months of barely being able to run, 10 weeks of not running, the comeback was slow and awkward. And I didn't expect it to be, I don't know, a year and a half really before I felt like myself when I was running, and stopped having the constant worry of, oh, if I run this far, is that going to make it hurt? Like, cause initially, like I waited 6 months and did a half marathon, and yeah, it got swollen like a basketball when I finished, and I was terrified. I was like, did I just redo it? And luckily, again, those sports doctors are the right people, because they're kind of like, does it hurt? I was like, no. And they were like, then it's just fluid. Keep going. I was like, okay. So yeah, the comeback was hard, but I think for whatever reason, I mentally decided when it happened that this was my opportunity to remember what it was like to be a beginner. Back when every single step you took was like a celebration. Like I got to the end of the block. Like that was a pat on the back. I remember the time I ran my first mile way back, and that was so exciting. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to have that mindset about this injury. And that was tremendous. I'm so glad I gave myself that gift, because there were certainly points where it was like, I mean, even now I'm still not quite back to where I was in some ways. I feel stronger in many others. Mm-hmm. And so it's easy to kind of get a little bit frustrated, but celebrating those milestones, that was amazing. Like that mentally. And when I work with runners now who have gone through injury, that's really the best advice I can give, is like, stop focusing on where you were. And like today you were able to go 10 steps farther than yesterday and pain-free. Like celebrate that, and then celebrate the next 10 steps.
I think that's so good you mentioned that. And probably that allowed you to connect with a group of your audience, or people who weren't your audience, who became your audience, who were in that maybe starting running, or had a big injury like you had. Like I remember when I took that 3 months off, just when I kind of quit running, when I did start again, I really kind of grew this deep respect for people who started running, because of how sore I would feel every day, and that was just 3 months off. Like, you know, and it helps you to kind of connect with people and give them a voice, because, you know, most of the running experts, or the people that people usually look up to, we've forgotten what it feels like to be like that. So that probably was good for you in many different ways as well, right?
I would 100% agree. When you've been running for over a decade, like you forget what it was like to get through that first mile and that struggle and the like, will I ever be able to run farther than this? So yeah, it was very helpful to go back and just remember all of that. And also to decide that I was going to make sure I was already doing all of the prehab before that. Like you said, I was actually super diligent and hadn't had an injury in like 10 years, but it was like, okay, there are things that I still need to work on. So I'm going to use this time while I'm building back to get consistent with that strength training and stuff like that. Yeah.
And was there any, just on the other side of things, was there any part of you during that time, maybe before you had the surgery, that felt a bit like a fraud? Like here I am trying to like tell people about how wonderful running is, or how you've got to do this to stay healthy, and I'm not healthy myself.
It was super frustrating that it was a knee injury, because I was like, oh, this is going to tell everyone who's ever said that running is bad for your knees. They're right. So actually I used it as an opportunity to do a lot of research and write a lot of articles. And I asked each of the orthopedic surgeons who I happened to have met with, I said, like, do you see this? Is running bad? And they said, no, I've never seen a higher incidence of knee pain in runners versus non-runners. And runners actually tend to end up healthier overall. And because they're healthier overall, they actually have less knee issues. So it kind of was like, okay, man, I'm going to go hard in on the research, and I'm going to double down on telling people why it matters to strengthen our hips and our core, because running may be hard, but it doesn't have to be painful, and we don't have to get injured. And for some reason, we have this kind of idea that like, it's just going to happen. Yeah. I'm going to get injured, but like, we don't actually have to if we'll just do some of these things. Like life happens, you get on a trampoline or you fall in a hole or whatever, but running doesn't have to be the cause of it.
Okay, thank you. Now, you've shown today that to many people listening, those who didn't know you before, that, you know, they can relate to you, that you're, you know, someone who we can connect with and learn from, and you've got great advice. So we've already talked about that. So tell us about the book. So you've got Run to the Finish is coming out as a book. By the time this comes out, it will be out as a book. Tell us about the book process and these like pinch me moments that, you know, writing a book is a dream.
Yeah. So I had a publisher come to me and ask if I wanted to do a book. And initially I was very hesitant. I didn't want to put out a book that I felt like had already been done. So I was like, there are books out there. Let me think about it. And I finally came back to this idea of like, the people that I really want to talk to, and the fact that I think running can be fun. And so the book has a lot of humor to it. And for me, I'm a very actionable person. I want like, tell me to do X, Y, Z. Like, don't just tell me a dynamic warm up is good. Like, tell me what to do. And so I was like, okay, that's the book I want to write. The book that sort of goes in on like, yes, you're a real runner, and here are the little easy things you can do. It doesn't matter what your pace is. These are going to help you enjoy running more, but also like, we've got to laugh at what we've chosen as like our preferred way to spend our time. Like, there's a reason other people think we're kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. And so I felt really excited about it. For me, writing the book was easy, which a lot of people have said they think is insane, especially
it's very
people
much in your style, isn't it? It's like this kind of, I'd say honestly, for those listening, the same style I write, in that it's like a friend. Like Amanda writes to you as if she's like a friend who's compiled everything she knows and put it in a easy to read format. So that makes sense. Like, because you are just doing you're speaking your truth, essentially.
Yeah, like I'm coming at it as a coach, but yes, a coach who's known you a long time. So your friend. And so that part, super easy. Everything after that is kind of intense. So figuring out promotion and all that sort of stuff is more than I ever anticipated, just because a physical product is so much different than the world I've inhabited for 8 years online. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for people to check it out, and I will put links in the show notes so you can go get yourself a copy, or I'm assuming it can be found at all the major bookstores that people would already know about. And just to kind of wrap up here, I know we're coming in on the end of time here, but you do love to read running books in general, so I would love to hear your 3 favorites, as you have gone through many, many books.
Oh my gosh, let me think. So Endure by Alex Hutchinson. And so I like some of those that are kind of the sciencey and really deep. But also kind of on the flip side of that is Older, Faster, Stronger by Margaret Webb. And I was really impressed. Again, I don't think it's a book that a ton of people know about, but especially for older runners, I thought there was something in there for everyone, but especially when you're kind of doing the like, oh, I'm older and nobody really talks to me. Like, she's got some really, really good advice. And then another one, the other one I definitely liked was Peak by Mark Bubbs. And so that's another kind of deeper science type one. So it may not appeal to everyone, but a book everyone should read is probably 80/20 by Matt Fitzgerald.
Hey, you're cheating. You added 4. But I'll let you get away with it. 80/20 by Matt Fitzgerald. Yep, Matt is the master of writing books, and that is definitely a good one for sure. All right, I will put links in the show notes to all of those. Amanda, where can people find you? I said I will have a link to the book in the show notes, so they can just go find it. Run to the Finish by just searching for that, or through your website as well. But where else can they find you?
So I am Run to the Finish on pretty much every platform.
With the
Instagram.
The word to TO, not the number.
Yes, correct. So every platform, Instagram, YouTube, the website, Facebook, I feel like I'm everywhere.
Yeah, you managed to get all your handles. I'm still mad at my Instagram, especially as it's one of those dead accounts. I'm just like, yes. I want to get it back. But yeah, you managed to grab all yours. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for being relatable, for all that you've done for the running industry, for actually doing the research. I know my listeners love that, the science and kind of getting the actual knowledge behind things, that you clearly do your work, put the time in, you don't just write things for the sake of writing things. And I appreciate you and all that you've done. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much. It was great to chat with you.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. A bit of a different direction of conversation to where we usually go, but I thought it was quite interesting and kind of seeing a side of running, a career that we are seeing in our industry that is very common, learning a bit more about it and just kind of thinking of the lessons that she has learned. And I really think that she's right. You know, the middle of the pack runners are kind of often left out and left to feel like they don't belong. So I hope after this episode you are feeling more included and realizing that you're just as valuable as anyone else. So thank you so much for listening to this show today and kind of allowing yourself to open your mind to those thoughts. Now, I want to thank you for listening just in general to this podcast. I know there are so many podcasts out there now that you could be listening to, so I appreciate you listening. And if you want to show your support to me and Running for Real, there are a few ways you could help me out. One is you could become a Patreon supporter. That's a small amount you donate per month to just kind of keep me going with what I am, giving you with these free podcast episodes, with the social media that I share, with the email newsletters, all those kind of things. That makes a massive difference. Even if you think it's just a few dollars a month, that just does make a big difference to me. So you can find that at patreon.com/running for real. You can also purchase the products from the sponsors I mentioned on the show. That is a huge help to me. Or you can, in the case of Vital Farms, who sponsors this episode, you can go enter to win a year's supply of ghee, because what do you have to lose? Which is wonderful for cooking. You don't get anything by doing that. But you can go to vitalfarms.com/ghee. That's GHEE. GHEE. I know that's a weird word. But if you go to vitalfarms.com/ghee and you do that, you enter to win and you say you heard from Running for Real. That's a huge, thumbs up to me from them. Oh, let me think about that. That would be a huge thumbs up to me from them, right? My pregnancy brain is not working right now. You know what I mean. Anyway, and the other brand I want to thank today is Body Health. You can get 10% off the entire website, especially Perfect Amino, which is the kind of magic that I have talked about that has helped me with my recovery throughout my many years I've been using them, but particularly when I was training really hard, it made a huge difference. And I've seen hundreds, if not closing in on thousands, of you kind of talk about how Perfect Amino has helped you. So I really enjoyed seeing that. You can get 10% off at tinamuir.com/aminos. That's AMINOS. And the third way you can support me is share these episodes with your community. If you enjoyed an episode, you can screenshot what you're listening to, share it online so that other people can find it. So thank you so much. There are links to all those things I just mentioned, plus everything Amanda and I talked about in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 179. And remember one final thing, that you can enter to win a free pair of Ultra shoes of your choice every month this year. If you enter once, you are in the drawing every month. I will notify the winner by email, so be sure that you do still receive my emails, or I can't let you know that you have won. But until then, my friends, have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.